Hey everyone, SunTide here. Hope you all are doing great. And if you aren't, here's hoping things get better. But yeah, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about the longsword in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak Title Update 3, and how Qurious Crafting affects the longsword builds. On screen right now, you can see the build that I would most recommend, but before we just talk about the build, let's talk about Qurious Crafting in general and what it means for the longsword. So yeah, if you don't know by now, in Monster Hunter Rise, you can spend Essence to add in some new things to your armor. You can add in new slots and skills, which massively increases the potential for each armor piece, and therefore the entire build. Luckily by now, the mechanics of Qurious Crafting have been data mined by the Tilnor, and later on I've simulated them to find the probabilities of getting each skill or slot augment on each piece of armor. And what we found out is that the really strong augments, things like attack boost or crit boost, are really hard to get. They're going to take you thousands of attempts just to get even one. And so making a whole build that just relies solely on getting things like attack boost all the time is a bit unrealistic. So the interesting question becomes, what are the strongest augments that you can actually viably get in Monster Hunter? And what are the best builds you can make out of those armor pieces? Specifically, I just want to make some builds that you can get with at least a 1 in 200 chance from a Qurious Craft, and I want to minimize the amount of pieces that you actually create. So yeah, these are going to be viable builds for Qurious Crafting for the longsword in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak Title Update 3. And the thing is, even with these rather strict requirements, you can actually still fit in all of the really important skills on the longsword. So you can max out Quick Sheath, max out Wyvern Whisperer, and still hit the big 4 damage boosting skills. So we can just exploit crit boost, attack boost, and crit eye. And then your status weapons can get build up boosts, and your element weapons can get your crit element, element exploit, element attack, blessings, and your Kaktus can get all of those. So the question then becomes, what else can we fit? Thanks to Qurious Crafting, what are the really important extra skills that we want to make sure our builds have now that we have the freedom to add things on? So if you were one of the people who watched my Title Update 2 Qurious Crafting video, you might have heard me talk about Intrepid Heart, and this skill is really good. And a nice bonus we get thanks to Qurious Crafting. So you get this from the Flaming Espionage gear. What it does is, as you attack the enemy, you fill up a gauge. It takes around 30 or so hits, or around 2 to 3 Sakura slashes. When the gauge is full, you wholly ignore knockback, and you severely reduce your damage from an attack. For the longsword, this is so good. Again, if you Sakura slash, it fills up almost half of the bar. If you use Spirit Helmbreaker, this makes you immune to roars when you're using a Spirit Helmbreaker, which means all of the annoying times you get roared out of a Helmbreaker is going to go away if you constantly attack the enemy, and Intrepid Heart is full. But yes, so this is a massive increase to damage uptime for the longsword. And thanks to how Qurious Crafting slot upgrades work, it comes in mostly for free if you use the Flaming Espionage seal. So this is basically a free skill we get from Qurious Crafting for the longsword. So yeah, it's really nice. Powder Mantle is also a really good skill. I talked about this briefly in the previous Title Update 3 video. If you don't know how it works, basically, well, you get it from the Risen Kaiser gear, the Risen Teostra gear, and as you attack the enemy, you get this red powder around you. Over time, it becomes a blue powder, and if you attack the enemy with a blue powder up, you do some absolutely massive damage to the enemy. And it's a lot of damage, it's hundreds of damage, and when I played with it, it easily contributed like 5% or so damage, 5% or so of my overall damage, which is massive. One skill boosting your damage by 5% is huge. That's like 4 points of attack boost. So Powder Mantle is good. I would basically force you to get this. Luckily, it comes in on gear that is already like the strongest gear for free. So you don't really need to force it. Powder Mantle is really good. This is just a Powder Mantle, great skill rant. Use Powder Mantle, it's amazing. Another really good skill that you can get from unique armor pieces is the Wind Mantle. I also talked about this in the last video. I also said it was probably really good. It is also very good. Playing with it a lot more, you really appreciate the extra cooldown reduction from your wire bugs. You get this from the Risen Kushala gear. And yeah, so we want to make sure we get both Powder Mantle and Wind Mantle in all of our builds, which we now can, while still getting all of our attack boosts. Finally, we've always had the skill. It's still really good. Mail of Hellfire, you get it from the Scorned Magnamalo gear. What it does is when you run Red Scroll, you massively boost your raw attack value at the cost of some defense. It's really, really good. If you're on the Blue Scroll, we get a lesser element bonus for a loss in resistance. That's less important. You want to make sure we're on Red Scroll. It's just worth noting that thanks to the new Qurious Crafting mechanics they added in this title update, the Scorned Magnamalo set becomes significantly better. I'll talk about that in a bit. But yes, so Mail of Hellfire becomes a bit stronger. If you saw the Lance video I posted earlier, I talked in that video about how all of the extra skills means we can slot in more sharpness boosting skills, which we always like. For the longsword, we haven't hit that point yet. The longsword is quite a skill-hungry weapon. So, we have to hit Quick Sheath, Wyvern Whisper, and we get benefit from Wind Mantles, so we don't get enough slots yet to add in a whole bunch of Handicraft or Master's Touch like you do for the Lance. But yeah, probably in a title update or two, we will hit the point where we start changing the longswords we use just because we can fit in Handicraft and Master's Touch. But yeah, so without further ado, these end up being the 8 longsword armor pieces that I'm going to recommend you get. So yeah, we get a few alternate options depending on what builds we use. Basically, we have one main build we use for the raw poison weapons, and another that we use for the elemental weapons. So yeah, for the headpieces, we're going to use the Prism Kushala Glare with 2 different Qurious Augments. For the raw sets, you want to use Quick Sheath, and for the elemental sets, you want to use Element Exploit, or Crit Boost, or Crit Eye, or Weakness Exploit. Any one of those is going to do. Both of these appear with about a 0.5% chance, and you want to use normal Qurious Crafting. Skill plus Qurious Crafting makes you lose a skill to gain a skill, and all of the skills on the Kushala Glare are pretty good. We don't want to lose any of them, we just want a skill. Luckily, Quick Sheath is relatively easy to get, so yeah, if you can get Quick Sheath, you should be able to get Quick Sheath relatively quickly. Element Exploit is a bit hard to get, but here you have quite a few options. Any of those damage boosting skills will do, so the totals on the purple pieces are going to be 0.52% chance. For the chest piece, for all of our builds, we're going to use the Risen Kaiser Mail for +2 slots, which you're going to get by normal Qurious Crafting. This gives us a free 1 slot and turns one of our 2 slots to a 3 slot, which is less important. So honestly, a +1 slot should do, but +2 slot is still achievable. 0.63% chance isn't that low. So yeah, this is just a nice. There's really nothing else that you can put on the Risen Kaiser Mail, so the free 1 slot just becomes like a nice free thing. This is probably the piece that gains the least from Qurious Crafting, but it is ultimately, even then, probably the best piece in the game because it's so efficient and has Powder Mantle. So yeah. Now for the arms pieces where things get interesting. So for the raw builds, we're going to use the Jaggy Gauntlets. A really early gear. This thing is really good just because it has a whole bunch of attack boost and a whole bunch of free 1 slots. So by default, it's really, really good just for those things alone. But because it is a low rarity gear, you can very easily get strong Qurious Augments. In this case, we're going to use it to get build-up boost. And you can get this with a massive 1.32% chance. So it's really easy to get build-up boost on the Jaggy Gauntlets. For the elemental builds, we're going to use the Barrier for Vambrace's X. We're going to try and get Burst on it. So we're going to do this via normal Qurious Crafting as well. So Burst is not too common, but again, we have options. If you get Burst, Crit Boost, Crit Eye, or Weakness Exploit, you're going to be fine. I recommended you get this thing last video as well, so this thing is just overall a really good piece. Barrier Vampires is in a nice situation where it's highly efficient and has middling rarity, so you can sort of viably get some pretty good skill augments. It's just going to be a bit rougher than on the Jaggy Gauntlets. It's a bit hard to aim for build-up boost from the Barrier Vampires, basically. But yeah. Now for the waist, we're going to use the Sinister Grudge Tacits on all of these things. So here we're going to use the Skill Plus Augment. So again, what the Skill Plus Augment does, it gets rid of a skill to add in a new skill, which is hopefully better. The Sinister Grudge Tacits by default has 2 skills. Mail of Hellfire, which is really good, and Coalescence, which is less good. We want to try and lose Coalescence to get a better skill. So for the raw builds, we're going to try and get Build Up Boost. which massively increases our damage if we have poison, which we do for our raw builds. For our elemental builds, we just want to get anything good. So I'm going to mainly recommend crit boost, but crit eye or weak exploit are exactly the same. You're just going to change what you slot in. So yeah, 0.57% chance of getting build up boost, 1.11% chance of getting all of the others. So yeah, for the leg piece, we're going to use the Flaming Espinasse Heal again. A free 2 slot gets us a free +2 slot gets us a free 2 slot, which means you can slot in anything, and this appears with a 0.6% chance. So this is really good, and this is the piece that gives us Intrepid Heart. And for the charm, we want to use attack boost 3, which you can get from the new Melding type pretty easily now. So yeah, these are going to be the 8 armor pieces I'm going to recommend for the longsword. 2 of these are similar from the last video, the other 6 are new. But honestly, these pieces are probably going to last you a long time. Wind Mantle you get on the Risen Kushala gear only. Powder Mantle is so good on the Kaiser Mail. And Sinister Grudge Tacit's Mail of Hellfire is always going to massively increase their damage. Unless we add Mail of Hellfire Fire Decoration, Sinister Grudge Tacits are probably going to stay meta for a long time. So yeah, with that being said, here are the final builds that I'm going to recommend. So the longsword I'm going to recommend most is going to be the Wyvern Blade Luna, with the Kaktus Himmel a close second. Both of these are poison longswords that benefit greatly from build-up boost. I remember before, to get build-up boost, we had to use the Risen Mizuha gear, which wasn't so good, but now we can add build-up boost on anything, so we can add it to the Jagged Gauntlets and the Sinister Grudge Tacits to get build-up boost 2 instead of build-up boost 1, for a nice bit of extra overall damage. So yeah, the Wyvern Blade Luna just goes all out on raw, whereas the Kaktus ends up getting a bit more element than we're used to, just because the Wyvern Blade Luna just has a monopoly on all of the raw damage. So yeah, both of these armor sets are exactly the same, the overall decorations change. The poison weapon, the Wyvern Blade Luna, maxes out on all of its attack boosting skills. The Kaktus Himmel ends up getting a bit more element in exchange for the affinity. But yeah, it does manage to get Fire Attack 5 and Teosha Blessing 2, along with Burst 3. So yeah, there's that. Now those are the raw options, but as always, we still have some really strong elemental options to maximize damage if an enemy is particularly weak to some element. So all the longswords still end up being the same. So for fire, we have the Volcanic Apocalypse. For water, the Abyss Springer Blade. For thunder, the Oppressor's Abyss. For ice, the Flicker Bishop Slash. And for dragon, the Red Flash. All the armor builds are going to be the exact same as one another. We're just going to use the sort of element variant of the armor pieces that we created. And most of these builds are going to be more or less the same as the previous ones, just with a few extra things. So all of these, we still get Wind Mantle, Powder Mantle, and Intrepid Heart, which we didn't get in all of the previous non-Qurious Crafting builds. And beyond that, most of our element stats tend to be the same, but we usually just try and fit in like an extra bit of attack boost. So in all of these, we actually get attack boost 4, at the very least. Some of them get a bit higher attack boost. But yeah, this basically means that overall our damage does get higher. We have not only just high element and low raw, we have high element and like medium raw. So yeah, you can see the sort of fire and water builds on screen right now. Again, a lot of it's mostly the same. Fire gets a nice benefit from the Teosha Blessing, water gets it from Kushala Blessing. Now we have the thunder and ice. So thunder's element is going to be a bit lower without access to the Storm Soul yet, the variant of the blessing we get from the Thunder Serpent Narma. But ice gets a whole lot of element from the Kushala Blessing. And finally we have the dragon, longsword, the Red Flash. Again, relatively low element, but some nice raw that ends up making it useful against enemies that are particularly dragon weak, like Malzeno. So yeah, those end up being our nice elemental longswords. And overall, these end up being my final conclusions and summary. So yeah, basically, thanks to Qurious Crafting, we can now fit all of our quality of life skills while still boosting our damage. So we get Intrepid Heart, Wind Mantle, and Powder Mantle, as well as Mail of Hellfire. And Poison specifically gets strong benefits from build-up boost. So yeah, as always, I hope that was interesting and useful for you. Thank you all for watching. If you did find it interesting, feel free to like and subscribe. And yeah, stay tuned for more Monster Hunter and Longsword and whatever else content. See you next time. Bye.